last week on the Shameless Podcast.
This was in 2022, I believe. Yeah, I was in Atlanta for about 3 months. I stayed in Atlanta to fully establish and kind of work on this because that platform is in Atlanta. So I was in Atlanta for about 2 to 3 months, and we were working on this kind of partnership. And that was in 2022. Yeah.
Welcome to Shameless. Here we explore the transformative power of courage and action.
Thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed our conversations and you want to have more insightful discussions and hear from other incredible guests, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us to grow and continue bringing this amazing content. Thanks for joining in and enjoy today's episode of Shameless Podcast.
And so at this point in time, I would like to segue into what you view this clash between cultures and the ability to express your culture from an African context within another space.
I've been under the school of thought quite recently, and which is what has kind of been of great excitement to me, right? And after kind of spending a lot of time in that, exactly that question you're asking me is what I've been asking myself for the past, say, 2 to 3 years. So what does that look like? What does taking Africa to the world look like, right? Do we even have definition of what that perfect picture could be? And in answering myself that question, I kind of came to a consensus that, in essence, what we might be missing, and I shared this in a talk at Columbia University I was giving, that I think what we are authentically missing in this concept of storytelling of African stories to the world. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that we are, as a people, wherever you are around the world, whether you're in Africa, whether you are in South America, in London, in Europe, Asia, there's a level of universalness that we all withhold as human beings, right? There are stories and concepts and ideas that make us and unify us as a world. And how I imagine the perfect picture painted of African stories being told is us tapping into those universal topics, those universal conversations that everyone around the world is experiencing. And I got to see this by engaging with Asian content, or South or North Korean content, or British and European content. And in all these stories that I was able to see, and even looking at our stories as well, that fundamentally we all have the same topics at core. It's either family, it's love, it's friendship, it's it's relationship between a mother and a daughter, mother and a father and a daughter. Like, all of these things are things that we all around the world experience. We all want the same things. We all want to experience fulfillment, love, joy, peace, right? In any way that we are. And what I believe we could then do as Africans is kind of enhance that and add elements of then our cultures. What does that then look like, right? It's either in the clothes that we get to portray, in the language that we get to use, in those cultural practices, as Dr. Marcus Collins says, those cultural practices that we get to then perform. But at the core, utilizing what is universal, right? And then showing the world how authentically universal we are as well. When I have conversations with people in America about Africa, and I get to hear that we've been alienated as a people to the rest of, and the pictures that have been painted make us, people believe that, we maybe don't have the same struggles. We don't have the same conversations around dinner tables. Oh, yes, we do, right? We talk about the same things, and that can be anywhere. And for me, through my travels, I've been able to see that at the core, we all want the same things. We all are seeking for the same thing. So, and then as Africans, and our responsibility is to show the world that we too have the same struggles. We also think and talk about love, right? We also think and talk about family. We also have, conversations about depression, anxiety. We also have conversations about, political things that are happening, and all of these things that the rest of the world doesn't think Africa has. I'm like, no, we are all the same.
No, we're there. We've got the same stories. That's very true. But then now you're then sitting in a very delicate or difficult position, right? Where you're coming to somebody who has got a very clear paradigm or thought process around an African view is X. But meanwhile, all the countries across Africa are different in their own right. Now you have to try to shift their thinking, shift that perspective. And so what I understand from what you're saying is that the first part is to engage with the similarities, but then infuse, and that then allows for somebody to then move along and join you on that journey. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's accurate. I think show the similarities, show the universalness of who we are. How we participate in the global context, because we are global citizens ourselves. How are we participating in that? And then showing the differences in the practices that we do. Then, because that opens up the conversation, showing you that I too have a sister or a brother just like you, showing you that I also seek love just like you, or I seek companionship and friendship just like you, opens a conversation. And then now you are able to then dig deeper to understanding the cultural norms and the things that make me authentically then African.
But then now, how then do you have confrontational conversation? Because, I mean, your storytelling, and not every story is put together. Some stories are, I'm standing my ground, I'm here, and I expect you to then meet me where I am. How is that something that you also think forms part of what you are exploring when you are mashing two cultures together?
I don't necessarily, I mean, there's obviously, I think it's the gentleness in which I approach those types of conversations. I've understood that, I've understood that there's a level of openness that I need to have into telling stories, and that's across the board. And my responsibility as a storyteller is to be delicate in how I then present stories, and I present those confrontational. How are we different ideas, different just ways of understanding the world. We, at the end of the day, my responsibility is to bring that conversation to the center and say, how are we exploring it? And and I've understood that responsibility and have then taken it into heart to say, I need to be careful in how I use this responsibility. I need to be careful in how I'm bringing both parties into the conversation in a delicate and responsible way as well. So yes, there are moments where someone, and I wouldn't even say necessarily America as only, right? But just across the world, and I'm very deliberate about the global aspect in the work that I do. I always talk about global, and if you kind of follow my journey, you'll know that there's just this global thing that she keeps talking about. But for me, there's that thread where I'm like, I want to insert not only an African point of view, a South African, a Cape Townian, from Kwalanga, like all of those different nuances that the world is curious about. And then as a storyteller, I must then say, okay, world, here's who I am. And maybe by knowing who I am, you'll understand the people from where I come from. And you'll be able to understand then what informs us as a people. And then you too can want to then participate into understanding my people. And the positioning of New York enables me to then tap into that global kind of stratosphere, because it is one of the most, one of the biggest cities in the world, and a lot of decisions are made in New York. A lot of things are decided in New York. So if we were to decide how we are telling African stories for the world, I was like, I think New York would be a perfect city.
Why not do it in New York? I completely agree with you. And so then my last question to you then is, which one do you think happens with regards to media? Does media shape the world, or is media simply a reflection of society?
I love that question, and it was something that we often debated in university. And who has the power? Does media? will a society have the power? And I believe media. I believe that media has a lot of power that, as people, we don't understand how much power media has over us. Media has existed for centuries, and we often think that media is just television, right? Or media is just like Instagram, but media as a vehicle is the concept of telling stories, the concepts of translating and sharing conversations, ideologies, and putting into the world how the world is meant to think, feel, and experience itself, right? That's what media is at the core. And the power of media is even beyond what we can imagine as a people. A lot of how we think, a lot of what we do, a lot of how we can see ourselves, how we see others, is informed by media. And how then how is it enabled to do so? Because media in and of itself is people. People control news. People control TV. It's people who make that, right? Therefore, we should then understand that it's not, the TV set is not just rolling by its own. Someone there is behind it. Whatever ideology is being passed through, whatever the way in which we are kind of shaping culture within media, that is determined by an individual or by individuals who then in and of themselves, they too are part of society. So whatever those individuals kind of decide or want to see and want to engage in, that's what we're going to start seeing being shaped. And that's how we're going to start seeing society enacting. We talk about things like fashion. A very, very minute example. Fashion, how people dress in a particular time and season and era of society is determined by media, by, how people, the music that people listen to. That music is and given to the people by media. Someone might not know a song unless they've seen it on TV or radio, because that's the role of media, to then take things and kind of decide for the world what the world needs to see, hear, and be. So for me, it's important that if you have something that you believe the world, if you have an idea or a particular position that you think the world needs to start embracing, then media is the best way to do that. And for me, it was one of the things that I was like, I believe that I have a voice that I think the world needs to hear, and I think that I would like to help shape the world in some shape or form. And I want to do that via media, writing, storytelling, etc. Because I know that responsibility is then given to the people who are in media to shape the world. So if I want to shape and change the world, I need to utilize that platform and that medium.
And I absolutely love those points you just raised, and it ties in with the quote for today's episode. And so the quote that I've gotten is Malcolm X, and he says, "The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power. Because they control minds of the masses." Now, you're taking yourself from Kuala Lumpur all the way to New York with something to share, something to represent. And you have put yourself in the epicenter of where a lot of decisions are made, but also where the world also reflects upon who they are and who others are as well. And so when I listened to your journey, not only the TED Talk that you had, where you talked about fires in the township, but the struggles, the hope, the vision, the inspiration, the curiosity, then that fire that ignited, these things are not only an experience that you have had that have driven you to New York, but it is also a very universal experience that a lot of people can take. And as the name of the podcast is, you have to accept yourself and be shameless in yourself, but then have the courage to show the world who you are. Because if we don't have people like you representing us sitting here in the middle of Africa, middle of nowhere, then we won't get a fair representation of who the people that we are, the types of people that we want to be. And so I would like to thank you, Vuyo, for joining us today, because your journey, your discussion, your achievements are a testament to what somebody with a passion, with a drive can achieve. If they just put the hard work in, they have a direction and they work towards that. So I really take a lot of inspiration from what we've shared, the story and journey that you've taken. And I would like to make sure, or I'd like to highlight to everybody that they need to click, like, and subscribe the Vuyo Show. Is it the Vuyo Show?
The Vuyo Show, yes. That's my current endeavor at the moment, alongside everything else that has transpired in the past couple of years. I think the Vuyo Show has been the platform that I've decided will then be at the core what the world will experience, stories will experience, certain different voices through. And I'm really excited about what the platform is going to continue doing in the world of media. And it's the Vuyo Show. It's on all social media platforms, the Vuyo Show. And also, it is also on Spotify, the Vuyo Show, YouTube, the Vuyo Show. And
And we'll do just that. I'd like to thank you yet again for joining me today on Shameless.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share as we embark on our mission to impact 1 million African lives by 2026.
This podcast is brought to you by Transformation Leader. You can follow us at www.t4leader.com.